Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Tim Clauser, with the Center Square's Washington State Capitol correspondent, Carlene Johnson, here to talk about a recent fundraiser luncheon that Carlene attended, notably with some spots at the lunch available if you're willing to fork out $2,500 for it. But what was notable was that Governor Bob Ferguson had the former vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris and still governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. He was there amid recent scandalous allegations around fraud and misuse of funds in his own state. Carlene, I know you had some trouble leading up to this event with getting in. Why don't you explain kind of what led up to this and what happened at the lunch?
We just couldn't get details. I mean, we found out about this over a week before the luncheon. And at that point, it was okay. We knew that it was going to be held on Tuesday, December the 9th. We knew it was going to be in Seattle. We knew it was Governor Ferguson's or the governor's annual December luncheon fundraiser. And then special guest would be Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. So we had all that. And I even had that confirmed from the state Democratic Party. The governor's office never responded to a single email with inquiry about, how do you get tickets? Or is this open to the press? Or what is the location? Why are you bringing Tim Walz when Walz is under a little bit of scrutiny right now for the whole Somali fraud investigation in his state, which some of our readers probably know is now ballooned from initially 1 billion in alleged fraud up to 8 billion in alleged fraud, and several whistleblowers saying that Governor Walz well knew about it and maybe covered it up, or I'm sure all that's going to come out. Neither here nor there. It was kind of a bad look, right, for Ferguson to bring Walz out as his headliner for this big fundraising luncheon. But I never received a single response to my emails or phone messages left at the governor's office for details about this fundraising luncheon. It was not until the day before we finally got some information that said you can buy a ticket and then the location will be revealed. So at that point, spoke to our, executive editorial staff here with the Center Square, and the decision was made that because we are a nonprofit, making a political donation was not an acceptable thing for our foundation, which I totally get. But then the decision was made to go ahead and show up anyway when we found out it was going to be at the Seattle Washington State Convention Center up on the 6th floor in a ballroom. Show up and see if anybody who's attending is willing to talk, get some idea of who's there. And I didn't expect to get inside the event. So I was interviewing people outside who were there. Why would you come? Seeing who was there. Lots of people. Newly elected Mayor-elect Katie Wilson from Seattle was there. King County Executive Girmay Zahalai was there. Lots of former and current state lawmakers and local elected leaders were there. And then tons of staffers from state agencies, lobbyists, and then just wealthy donors.
Well, I hope they were serving caviar if they were charging $2,500 to attend the luncheon. But yeah, interesting to see just the timing with what's going on in Minnesota in this federal investigation into the fraud there. A lot of criticism, and I understand you talked to some people outside about that. But kind of what was the sentiment to people that you talked about with Walz showing up? Because with this being Ferguson's fundraiser, I could understand if the vast majority of the attendees were supporters of his, supporters of Democrats in general. So how did they kind of respond to the timing of the situation?
Yeah, this one couple I spoke to who apparently active lobbyists, one is a former Evergreen professor and his wife, who said that they've had the governor into their home. They support him. They believe in his policies, obviously very left of center. But when I asked them about Governor Walz being the headliner and given all the, the investigation he's under, was this not, maybe bad timing? Maybe you should have scheduled for someone else to be the keynote speaker. They said, absolutely not. There's their take on it. And I included this in my article on Tuesday. Their take on it was that just because Governor Walz is accused of something, and there could in fact be some sort of, they use the word mafia crimes committed here, there's lots of other mafia crimes that need to be investigated, and this is no worse than any other. They suggested that the attention to it from the Trump administration was just to make Governor Walz look bad. So that was kind of their take. Another couple was speaking with me about their, excitement to hear what Governor Walz and Governor Ferguson had to say in the luncheon. And then when I questioned them about Walz's appearance, they both looked at my media badge and said, we don't really trust members of the media, so we're not going to talk to you anymore. And I thought, well, you were going to talk to me until I asked about Governor Walz, but neither here nor there. I got in, Tim. That was the cool thing. I got in. I did not expect to get inside the ballroom. I did not buy a ticket. I went up to the gentleman who was taking tickets to let people in, and there was a flood of people going in, doors on the right. Well, those are the people that had paid the extra for VIP tickets, right? Where they did the meet and greet with Walz and Ferguson before. And so they were going in the door on the right. I think this kid that was taking the tickets at the door, I call him a kid, I think he was in his 20s. He looks at me and he goes, are you in the VIP? I said, I don't think so. And he goes, well, then go this way. And so he shuttles me in the other doors and boom, I'm in. And I was like,
It's quite the security.
And they did have a ton of security inside, and I hung around the back because they did have some TV cameras there, or cameras, I think, for Ferguson's office and Walz's office. No mainstream media. This was not an open to the press event. So I just kind of hung back by the staging area for filming. Nobody questioned me. I was carrying my backpack with, my supplies. Nobody ever questioned my attendance. And I think I looked unscary enough or something, but was able to attend the event and hear what Governor Walz had to say. And I was a little bit surprised at just how aggressive he was. Within 2 minutes of taking the stage, Tim, he was going after President Trump, and then immediately addressed the issues that are dogging him right now. And the question about, a potential cover up and all these fraudulent payouts and NGOs with the Somali community and money that maybe went back to Al-Shabaab and others. I mean, he said, we're doubling down. He said, not only are we not intimidated by this investigation and the Trump administration, we're going to, in the state of Minnesota, be more open to Somali refugees and double down on those policies and programs that support that community. I was a little bit surprised that he came out and said that.
Yeah, definitely an interesting approach to this. And I understand there's been a lot of criticism from people on the left, especially Democrats, saying, look, so the way that people are talking about this investigation and everything that's going on, it's generalizing the entire Somali community. And I can understand that. But at the same time, you have massive allegations of fraud in the state. And much of it is linked back to a handful of Somalis that are in the country. Is that to say the entire Somali community is to blame? No. But that doesn't make it not true or not real that these allegations are flowing out and that they need to be investigated. And it should never be controversial to try to root out fraud. But it is interesting to see him kind of push back on that generalization by saying, look, we're just going to bring more into our state. Not that that's a bad thing, but definitely an interesting approach with PR, considering that this isn't really panning out in their favor across the mainstream media. And a lot of people are asking questions, not only outside of Minnesota, but also the people living in Minnesota. They're looking to the governor's office and questioning what's going on.
And I will be so curious, Tim, to find out, and I don't know if we'll have access to this information or not, but how much money they made at this event yesterday, because you mentioned the $2,500 figure. That was for table sponsors, right? If you want to invite some friends and fill up your table of 8 and you're the guy with deep pockets, so you're going to pay the $2,500. There were a lot of people that, paid $125, $150, and then on up. And of course, then once you're there, I mean, they had, what's this guy's name? Is it Osman Salahuddin? He's that freshman legislator, from up north of Seattle, and open Muslim. And he spoke between Walz, who opened up after a couple of other people, including Governor Ferguson's twin son and daughter, and then Governor Ferguson getting up there. And he was like, everybody right now, this is not a request, this is a demand, laughter, laughter kind of a thing. Pick up the paper on your tables. There's a big old fat QR code, and it was about this big on the table, so your phone couldn't miss it. Please, right now, make these donations. For $500, you'll get this little mini constitution signed by Governor Walz and Governor Ferguson when you leave. For $1,000, you'll get this. For $5,000. And there was this massive sense of urgency. And then he said the reason why is because by the end of this week, it's that cutoff period where, Governor Ferguson is not allowed to be taking any kind of campaign donations. But this was all about couched as a re-election campaign. He's not even been in office a year yet, but they are looking towards re-election. And I think it's important that people know you constantly hear Governor Ferguson say he does not accept any corporate donations, which can be much larger, right? Doesn't accept any big donations from Microsoft, Boeing, Amazon, Google, Meta, whatever. But when you go to PDC records, you can clearly see that many Microsoft executives, including Brad Smith, who's openly talked about in some mainstream media, large publications like, hey, we might be pulling out if these business taxes get any more burdensome. Brad Smith donated in the last 2 months the maximum for an individual, which is two $2,400 contributions within a time period. Many other Microsoft executives are also in those PDC documents, which you're familiar with. So, yeah, you can say you're not accepting corporate donations, but when you have executives from these corporations, many of them making the maximum contributions, well, collectively, it amounts to a big old corporate contribution. So I think that's important because we kept hearing that yesterday saying, you all little people must donate because we don't take any big corporate dollars.
Well, political action committees can run what's called indirect expenditures. They can run advertisements on TV, billboards, and stuff, and they don't even have to consult the campaign. So it's interesting to see who does donate to these, not just those cash donations and in-kind contributions, but those indirect expenditures as well. But that's definitely something I'll be keeping my eye on, is that the Public Disclosure Commission and the PDC's website in the coming weeks to see how much money did Ferguson make at this. And, if it's a considerable chunk, I mean, he still has another few years in office.
Yeah, just because the tickets to get in, that's one thing, right? And I'm assuming many of those tables were the big, VIP, $2,500 minimum. And that was just the minimum. Lots of people are going to go in higher. But I did want to say, because I know we're running short on time, Governor Walz was a rock star in that room on Tuesday. Multiple standing ovations. And every time he said something either against the Trump administration or he was, me and Ferguson couldn't be more allied than we are at this point, standing for the values that we know Washingtonians and Minnesotans, are firm on. And multiple times he was a rock star in that room. And it was not an insignificant amount of people. There was probably, I heard one estimate of 1,000, another estimate of 1,200. So more than 1,000 people in that ballroom.
Yeah.
And he was a rock star. He was a rock star.
Hey, that's no surprise to me when you have people footing $100, $200, $2,500 just to go hear them talk. But it will be interesting to see what the average Washingtonian thinks after the legislature attempts to balance another multi-billion-dollar shortfall in the next few months. But Carlene, I appreciate you going to this event and weaseling your way inside the doors for us and getting content on this.
Don't be thinking I cheated.
But Carlene, thank you. For anyone hoping to read that story, you can catch it at thecentersquare.com. Otherwise, thank you for joining us for another episode of Washington in Focus.